Welcome to Archana in HR, where I bring you thought-provoking conversations with leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of business. Today, I have the privilege of introducing someone whose work stands at the intersection of strategic leadership, business excellence, and professional development, Kashan Awais. Kashan is a certified executive and leadership development coach. He also teaches at the Lawn School of Business, University of Lethbridge, and is the founder of Naburva Business Solutions, a management consulting firm dedicated to help large businesses in Canada as well as internationally. At Naburva, Kashan and his team specialize in providing top-tier business consulting services across domains like process improvement, business analysis, project management, talent management, and leadership development. Kashan's approach is backed by both his impressive credentials and his extensive hands-on experience. With certifications such as CPHR, SHRM-SCP, Certified Talent Management Practitioner, and Lean Six Sigma Black Belt holder, Kashan brings a wealth of knowledge to his work. His expertise isn't limited to theory, it's been proven through real-world implementations at large corporations. Beyond consulting, Kashan is a passionate advocate for training and professional development. In today's conversation, we will dive into a compelling topic with Kashan, process excellence in HR, exploring how methodologies like Lean Six Sigma can transform critical HR functions into streamlined, high-impact processes. This is going to be an insightful and inspiring discussion for anyone looking to elevate their approach to HR, leadership, and business strategy. Hi, Kashan. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you join us on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's generally a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So let's start with the basics. Lean Six Sigma has its roots in manufacturing, and we are increasingly seeing it applied in HR functions. So for our listeners who might not be familiar, can you explain what Lean Six Sigma is and why is it so relevant in HR today?
Right. So you rightfully put it. It originated from manufacturing, and unfortunately, to this day, there's still a widespread belief that it's only relevant to manufacturing. There are increasingly more and more service sector industries are coming, or organizations coming towards this methodology and starting to implement it in their operations. But still, there's still a long way to go. As far as HR is concerned, let me begin by Lean Six Sigma first, and then I'll talk about its relevance to HR. So Lean Six Sigma, basically, there are two different methodologies, but now they're used in combination because the end goal or objective is the same, which is to increase the process quality. Lean focuses on removing the waste from a process. Okay, so we analyze the process in detail. We identify whatever forms of wastes the process has, and we take those waste out of the process. Okay, that's what Lean focuses on. Six Sigma, on the other hand, is a more data-driven and statistics-based approach. And again, we measure the process, we do some statistical analyses on the process, and we determine what is causing variation in the process. Okay. So, some sort of variations is natural in a process, other is not. So, the unusual variation or special cause variation, which is driven by some special triggers, that's what we focus on, and we try to reduce the process variability as much as we can, realistically. So together, these both philosophies, Lean and Six Sigma, they focus on improving the process quality, like I said. Now, when it comes to HR, any process that can be measured, it means that you can apply Lean and Six Sigma. So HR is no exception, right? So if you, let's say, talk about recruitment function, you can subdivide it into various sub processes, right? So you receive a job requisition, you create a job posting, you start inviting applications, you do interviews, and so on and so forth. So all these sub processes within this recruitment function, they can be measured, right? So which means that you can apply Lean and Six Sigma methodology to improve the process variability and enhance this process quality. Same goes with onboarding, same goes with HR administration and other functions. So yeah, that's how it applies into HR, and that increases the process quality.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I additionally find this concept of value stream mapping quite fascinating. I understand it's a tool that identifies non-value adding activities and which can bog down HR processes. So, can you maybe walk us through how this works in the HR context, perhaps with examples like recruitment or onboarding?
Sure. Yeah, let's take recruitment for example. So, like I said before, any process that you can, you know, drill deep down into and divide them into sub processes. So, what a value stream map does is that it breaks down the main process into sub processes, and it basically looks at how the process flow looks like. Okay, what the value stream essentially is, hence the name value stream mapping. So, starting from the supplier, when they, in this case, would be a hiring manager who gives you a recruiter a job requisition. That's where the process starts. So, all the steps that it follows from there onward, we capture all those steps in a value stream map, and we look at the timeline and the processing time within each sub process or each stage. So once you do that, you have drafted a visual, map of what the process looks like, along with the processing times. If there are any bottlenecks, you can more or less see it, right? You're
Yeah.
not really deep down into the process as of yet, but as a starting point, that's a very good tool which helps you identify where possibly the bottlenecks could be. So you're able to identify those bottlenecks and in a process through a value stream map.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Um, I have, personally seen how processes sometimes become overly complex, like too many approval steps, or there are redundant data entries. And now, when I hear about value stream mapping, I think it's a game changer for helping teams see where those inefficiencies are. Happening basically. So it sounds like it really brings clarity to things we might otherwise overlook.
Absolutely, you're right, and we oftentimes overlook um, the importance of visual tools.
Yeah.
Any tool essentially that is visual in nature, like either you're talking about the value stream map or a detailed process map, like a swim lane flow chart or swim lane process map. What
Yeah.
they do is that they so concisely summarize a complex process, which would maybe written on a 10-page uh, process manual. But you take a glance at it, and within 10 to 20 seconds, you can easily understand. Even a layperson can easily understand what the process steps look like, what the decision points are, what different stakeholders are, what different touch points are. So it makes it really easy to analyze the process.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, this brings me to my next question. It's about the DMAIC framework, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, which is at the core of Six Sigma. Is what I believe. And can you outline how HR teams can implement these steps? For instance, maybe how we can define what success looks like in the HR projects.
Absolutely. So first of all, you would want to be clear for yourself. The project team, they should be clear about what they want to improve, whether it's the application processing time, whether it's it's the cycle time to fill the like a position for which you're trying to hire for or recruit for, whether it's the error rate. What is it? What is the metric that you're trying to address essentially through your project? So define essentially means that you're defining that variable, the Y variable that you're trying to address through your Lean Six Sigma project. Measure is essentially once you've defined, you've identified, okay, this is what we want to work on. This is the metric. This is the KPI that we want to improve. That's the natural, subsequent step in the process is to measure the data on that particular metric or any other variables which kind of result in an impact on this dependent variable. Okay, so that's what you do in the measure phase. In analyze phase, you run some statistical tests to identify like the process variability that I was talking to you about earlier. And in improve phase, you redesign the process, you redefine many things, you may eliminate certain steps, you may add some steps, you may add some additional tools, you may want to automate a process. So whatever steps you're taking it to improve the process from a past state to a new state in which um, the metric that you're trying to address, that metric will improve. Okay, so that's what improve phase is about. And control is essentially what it means. Once you've implemented certain strategies, implemented certain processes, certain steps, um, you want that to stay in place, right? Of course, you will evaluate the results, but once you've gotten to a point where you're sure that, okay, that's what the new process is going to look like going forward, you want to make sure that you have a control plan in place. And control plan is a living document throughout any Lean Six Sigma project, whether HR or any other function. So in control, you essentially want to make sure that everybody related to a process, the process owners or any other stakeholder, that is basically a touch point in that process in whatever capacity. They know exactly what they're supposed to do if the process goes out of control. Like I mentioned earlier, you're measuring the data
Right.
on a process. So
Yeah.
whatever data point, goes out of a certain limit, you know what to do. You know how to control. You have a control mechanism essentially in place to bring the process back to its original desired level where you want it to be.
Right. Yeah. So on this topic of measuring, does recruitment, it's kind of an, falling on the hotbed of inefficiencies. So how can we measure waste in the recruitment process? Like, does that fall under improve stage or analysis?
So when you're trying to assess the waste, that you're doing it, you're addressing it via lean methodology. Okay, so once you're doing the process analysis, developing process maps, in those maps it will tell you like it will give you a rough idea at the very initial stage when you're developing a value stream map. But later when you become more thorough in your process mapping and you design a or develop a swim lane process map, for example, that kind of unfolds the whole process layer by layer. So it's fully exposed. So whatever inefficiencies there are, you'll be able to visually see where you need to focus on. So waste could be of like different types. It could be over processing, right? It could be overproduction. In case of recruitment or onboarding, let's say, mostly it's over processing. Um, approval steps, like you were saying before, or data going back and forth between touch points where it doesn't
Right.
really add any value. So once you take a deeper look at the process and you know remove all the layers and view it in very like granular detail, that's where you identify the waste, and that's where you have a starting point on how
Yeah.
to remove that waste.
Okay, that's interesting again. So when we redesign this entire workflow, like onboarding, we discussed, teams can sometimes resist changes. So have you encountered resistance, in your experience? And if so, how did you work to overcome it and get buy-in from the team?
Right. So you're absolutely right. Resistance is always there whenever you talk about change. But the thing is that it's natural. We cannot just wish it away, right? What we can do is that we can manage it. So, which is why, on a side note, the Lean Six Sigma course that I teach, change management is a component within that course. Because essentially, whatever function you're applying a Lean Six Sigma methodology in, you're essentially talking about some sort of change. You're essentially talking about moving a process from an old state to a new state. You're talking about, making changes to like either big changes or minor changes. But regardless, change is definitely involved, right? And whenever there's the idea of change, we know that there's resistance. And mostly it originates from, factors like uncertainty or discomfort. And the fact that, well, to me, at the root of everything, like in regards to this resistance to change, the root of the problem is that people are not really, when they're not really involved in the change process, they're scared of it, right? So the best
Absolutely.
way to deal with change is to involve the stakeholders right from the beginning. Because if you do that, what you're essentially doing is that you're making that project, you're making that change their baby, right? So they wouldn't want it to fail at any
Mm.
cost. On the other hand, if like a magnificently designed process, a like a project work done in great detail, you've covered all the bases, and you implement the process without the stakeholders knowing, without the process owners knowing, then the chances are that they will take it as something that is imposed on. And no matter how technically sophisticated it is, no matter how much product or effective in terms of the solution itself it is, the
Mm.
chances are that they're going to reject it because they were not involved. They don't understand what it entails. They don't have any sort of association with the change, and the the obvious result will be that they are likely
Right.
to reject it or resist it to whatever degree. So if you involve them from the beginning, the chances are that the project is going to be really a success.
Absolutely. I love that approach. Involving people and everybody from the beginning, I think, makes so much more sense. So every new methodology comes with its challenges. So, and I believe Lean Six Sigma is no exception. So we did discuss about the challenges that we have from the people side. So what are the
Right.
biggest challenges or hurdles you have seen maybe HR teams face when adopting it, like as a system, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Right. So the biggest would be around change and change management. So unless the managers who are leading the project, because I mean, people are involved in projects in different capacities. So if a consultant like myself is helping a team of people with implementation of a new methodology or redesigning the process, I have perfect clarity on what needs to be done. The manager from the client side who's working the project, they have perfect clarity or close to perfect clarity on what needs to be done as well. Their team might have different interpretations about what the change entails. So having everybody on board, like we were discussing before, in terms of uh, like the change management um, subject. So that is one of the biggest challenges and opportunities at the same time that managers can leverage, but it needs to be done from the very onset. You cannot, implement a change management strategy in the middle of a project. The chances are that it's not going to work as well as it would if you were to take this particular area into account from the beginning. So that's one. Then another hurdle that might be there, especially in case of HR managers and HR professionals, is that traditionally speaking, an HR
Mhm.
professional is neither exposed to the area of project management nor
Right.
Lean Six Sigma, right? So whenever, and I've seen this happen, and I've seen this, actually
Yeah.
hands-on with people I've been working with, that due to this non-exposure into these areas, a like an HR professional or an HR manager, when they're handling or managing a project that involves like redesigning a process improvement, Lean Six Sigma, or change, or automation, or any project for that matter that addresses the improvement in the process, they suffer from kind of an imposter syndrome, right? Because they've been put in charge of managing a project,
Yeah.
but they think that they know nothing about it because they haven't studied this subject in their academic lives, and unless they are really really big on upskilling and they have exposed themselves to these areas, the chances are that they will feel quite a bit of discomfort in managing a project which they
Yeah.
think that they know nothing about. So
Yeah.
this imposter syndrome sometimes it can become a hurdle in how effectively a Lean Six
Yeah.
Sigma project is managed by an HR professional.
That's right. I completely understand that. So I've also observed how change initiatives in HR, especially processes like these, starting on the change management, can face resistance on a great go. Yes, so let's pivot to the benefits. What are the key advantages HR teams gain by applying Lean Six Sigma? Like, I'm particularly curious about how it can result in cost savings by reducing wasted time. We just discussed that on the beginning of the podcast. So, how do we go about that?
So yeah, like you said, the biggest benefit of Lean Six Sigma methodology, whether it's in HR or manufacturing, it's cost savings. You are when you're trying to improve a process, you're trying to address it so that it changes for good, changes for better, right? Um, so you're introducing some kind of efficiencies. You're removing waste. You're increasing the productivity. Somehow you're improving the process. You're improving the metric that you're addressing through your project. So, and naturally, once you remove like a bunch of non-value adding activities from a process, you save time. And it may not seem like a lot in at a smaller, at a micro scale, but once you add it up on an annual basis, how much you're saving in terms of time and the related cost, those are big numbers. So depending on the size of a company, you, you can save thousands and thousands of dollars, which were just going um, or wasted on the time that was lost or being lost on non-value adding and non-productive activities.
That's great. So, can you give us an instance of how these challenges could differ or benefits based on the size of the organization? Suppose, say, there's an organization with 100 employees. How is that different with an organization with 1,000 plus employees?
So first of all, the scale is going to be different. So which means that the dollar amount of the saving is going to be different, right? So if there's a for one candidate for recruitment or onboarding of one candidate, if you're saving 2 hours of time as a result of Lean Six Sigma process like initiatives,
Right.
this 2 hours, will be multiplied by all the number of recruitments that are happening within a given year or smaller business versus a larger business. So the dollar amount will be proportionally different. But from a percentage point of view, maybe it's going to be the same. Um, but what we don't have any doubt about is that it definitely does result in cost savings. So whether it's like $100,000 or $10,000 for a smaller business, depending on their size and their budget, that saving matters a lot to them, and it definitely does impact uh, their bottom line when you look at it from a financial perspective.
Oh, that's great. So we also love a good success story on this podcast. So can you share an example where again Lean Six Sigma dramatically transformed the entire HR as a system where whether it was recruitment, onboarding, or any another function, and we would love to hear the impact it had.
Yeah, so there are, many examples. We talked about recruitment, we talked about onboarding. Let's talk about payroll, for example. So payroll is directly tied to the time and attendance, right? So if an organization has a manual and clunky time and attendance management process, the approval paths for approving the time cards, they're you can imagine they would be very, very lengthy. If you automate a project, okay, so that eliminates the chance of human error into the process, because like you have to essentially input the data, the hours, and somebody at the other end of the chain is just going to approve them. So instead of
Right.
manual sheets and registers where there's like overwritings or mistyped or miswritten times in and times out, which introduce errors, of course, in the payroll process. There are some checks and balances in which you can do the thing a certain way, and there's literally no chance of error. And in Lean, we call this concept of mistake proofing as poka-yoke. So you essentially make it impossible for somebody to make a mistake. For example, when you're filling out a form online, typically the
Right.
fields with the red asterisks, they mean that you cannot proceed to the next step until you've filled in those columns or those fields. So that's an example of poka-yoke, right? So the same way, when you automate a process, there's so many things which would offer an opportunity to for an error. You eliminate those chances. You eliminate those risks for errors. So yeah, I have worked on multiple projects that involved automation of time and attendance system and payroll system, and the reduction in the processing time and the reduction in the
Right.
error rate. Those things have always been phenomenal. I mean, when we look at the process, post implementation versus pre implementation of the initiative, um, then there's a stark difference, right? So
Absolutely.
it's not just onboarding, it's not just recruitment. It's like I was saying in the beginning of this discussion, like any function or any process essentially that can be measured, you have the opportunity to apply Lean Six Sigma, and you have the opportunity to reduce wastes, mistakes, rework, etc. That kind of puts a drain on the resources of a system.
Absolutely. So I have a follow-up question on what we just spoke. Today, we are seeing a lot of AI tools coming in place, and a lot of small and big organizations are using automated, uh, ATS platforms. Do you think these organizations are paying attention to the benefits Lean Six Sigma has, or are they just following automated tools that are available, which are handy?
So in
Yeah.
regard to the tools like human resources information system or human resource management systems, the the thing is that they have a lot of opportunity to tweak them, to customize them, and make the process according to what you need within a given organization, right? And by the way, what might be considered as the most efficient when one organization may not be considered so in another. So, for example, in a very large organization where a process essentially has to go multiple approval paths, um, there are maybe some regulatory, checks and balances involved. So
Right.
those additional paths, those additional steps may not be adding direct value to the process itself. So they may not be like a value adding activity, but they are indispensable in a sense that they are a requirement of the regulatory compliance process, right? So in
Right.
that case, even you have those steps in place, and your process could still be efficient because you cannot really avoid those steps. In another organization, which has a way flatter structure, maybe uses the exact same HRIS or HRMS, but for the other organization, those extra steps would constitute as a waste because they don't essentially need those extra steps. They're not required from a compliance perspective or from any other standpoint. So you have to be cautious about what you're looking at, what the requirements are, what the environment is in which a company is operating. So defining what is wastage, what is efficient, it doesn't have to be arbitrary. It has to be in the context of a particular situation that you're looking at. So that's one thing. The second, like I was saying before, you have the ability in these software systems to tweak and customize them based on whatever works best for you. So making them in compliance with lean principles, again, you will have to see what makes most sense for you. If you're sending off information from one stakeholder to another, and party A and party B don't necessarily know what they're supposed to do with that information, and they're just following the process just for the sake of it, because maybe somebody wrote that process in a policy like 2 decades ago. Then you have to look at it from an efficiency perspective, and take that step out if it's not adding any value, or if it's not like indispensable part of the process from a compliance perspective. So yeah, I mean, you have to, like, it has to be really a customized approach and a very, very, like, it's a case by case basis that you determine what or how you want to use a certain tool.
Absolutely, that totally makes sense. Any prerequisites that you recommend to the HR professionals to kind of prep themselves before they, get into implementing the Lean Six Sigma? So anything that we should be cautious about?
Right. So the first thing I would recommend is that if you're going after, like, if you're trying to initiate a Lean Six Sigma project, you need to be sure in yourself or your own skill set that you're not just getting into something that you don't know much about. Having surface level knowledge about certain things, it doesn't really pay off really good in terms of what output you're going to bring from your initiative. So if you're trying to get into something of this sort, like the Lean Six Sigma project, then you will have to be trained and you will have to be certified from a reputable, service provider. Like, I mean, okay, let me say this. Unfortunately, Lean Six Sigma is not really regulated like accounting profession is or like HR profession is, right? So you cannot really put any checks and balances on who's offering what kinds of services. So you cannot really sign up for a program that charges you like $100 and gives you a Lean Six Sigma black belt in a week. It doesn't work like that, right? So Lean Six Sigma black belt is a project management level certification, right? So a Lean Six Sigma black belt holder is a project leader. So it makes sense for such a professional who's pursuing this certification to undergo an extensive coursework to work on a project, either a project simulation or an actual project, but have some sense of how projects are managed, what is stakeholder management, what kind of different statistical tests are out there, in which case you apply them, what are the what are the different tools that you use to analyze your data. Okay, so what is graphical representation of data? So unless you have nice, good exposure to these areas, I don't think it would be a good idea to jump into a Lean Six Sigma project, because with that, surface level knowledge, the chances are that you will fumble a lot. It may take you a lot
Right.
longer to complete a project because you don't essentially know the uh, like the details or the technicalities about the project. or the methodology itself. So equipping yourself with the right tools and having the right skill set is really, really important. That's one thing. And second, like I was saying just before, um, is that you you cannot use a cookie cutter approach in every situation. Every process has its own requirements. Every organization operates in a unique environment. So, for example, I work with a client that operates in a nonprofit sector. There's a heavy interaction with the provincial government and to a certain degree federal government as well. There are so many things that you have to do in that organization. There are certain steps, certain processes you have to follow them the way they are, right? There's not much of an opportunity to introduce lean or cut down steps from or sub processes from a main process, because if we do so, we run the risk of becoming non-compliant. We don't want that. We can't afford hefty fines or bans on us because we try to take some pieces out of the equation which were
Of
supposed to
course.
be there. So having a realistic idea of what you're looking at, what you're addressing, what the environment is, who the stakeholders are. And by the way, stakeholders also an important component in my Lean Six Sigma courses that I teach. Because without this knowledge, the chances are that you're looking at it from a very narrow perspective. If you're using just your own lens to address a process or to improve a process in your perception, the chances are that you will miss out on how other stakeholders see it. And if that happens, that's going to create a lot of misalignments and possibly some major failures as well. So instead of improving the process, it could be counterproductive. So a couple of things to summarize it again. One, you have to have the proper skill set. And second, you have to make sure that you're taking into account all the relevant variables within context of the organization that you're serving, not just whatever works best for, let's say, Motorola or General Electric. It may not necessarily work for your organization. So you have to, be cognizant of that fact as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a lot to take care before we even step into understanding Lean Six Sigma. So, yeah, this brings me to my last question. Can you throw some light on how can you and your team help HR professionals learn more about Lean Six Sigma, and how can they start implementing this tool in their organization?
So, in terms of help, for example, I provide training and professional development services in the areas of a couple of things that I do, like Lean Six Sigma, like HR project management, like leadership development, right? So, specifically in the context of Lean and Six Sigma, I in fact do have a few HR professionals who are at the moment enrolled into my Lean Six Sigma programs, and the very reason that they got enrolled is that they wanted to become able to, you know, um, implement these methodologies in the functions organizations that they work in. So, like I was saying, the proper training is the first thing. So, if somebody wants to sign up for my Lean Six Sigma
Yep.
programs, I'll be more than happy to help out those HR professionals, especially by providing them with specific projects, specific project simulations that relate to an HR function, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Rather than just a generic supply chain or manufacturing project. They have the opportunity to work on specifically HR projects, which after completing which would have the confidence of on how to apply their skill set in a particular setting rather than
Absolutely.
just a generic methodology that they know about.
That's great. That's great. So yeah, this has been such an enlightening conversation. Kashan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and real world insights on how lean can be transformative to HR professionals. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, if you're considering implementing these principles in your own HR teams, remember that it's a journey of continuous improvement. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. And as always, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or drop us a message with your thoughts or questions. And Kashan is always here to help us out with the implementation of Lean. And thank you for tuning into Archana in HR. Until next time, keep innovating and keep growing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shoshna, for having me here. Have a good day.